Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, NPDES Permitting, New and Proposed Rules and Policies. My name is Helen Miller with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this morning's session. Ashley is an environmental manager in Ohio EPA's Division of Surface Water. Prior to her current position as NPDES manager, Ashley worked for the division chief in several different programs, including enforcement, rules, NPDES, and pretreatment. Before working for Ohio EPA, Ashley worked as a microbiologist in the Research and Development Department of Lexmark. She has 2 bachelor's degrees from The Ohio State University, 1 in environmental science, water specialization, and 1 in chemical engineering. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Ashley.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Helen. So as Helen said, my name is Ashley Ward, and I'm skipping ahead too much, and I'm the NPDES program manager, as well as the wet weather and 208 program manager out of our central office in Columbus, Ohio. A brief presentation outline is I'm going to start with some logistical and administrative updates, and then dive into rules and regulations that are in process that might affect your NPDES permit. Then we will discuss nutrients, a statewide 208 plan update, and then lastly, I'm going to end with some frequently asked questions that I often get when I do presentations or am talking to different facilities. And with that, it is time for our first poll. So there are going to be 3 polls today. The first question is, does your facility have A, an individual NPDES permit, B, a general NPDES permit, C, I work with multiple facilities, so maybe you're a consultant or a contract operator, or D, no NPDES permit?
So Ashley, back to you.
Great. So I'm waiting for it to switch back to the presentation.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So the first administrative update that I wanted to talk about is OPSRP. Ohio EPA Division of Surface Water has formally switched over to our new service, the Certified Operator Minimum Staffing Reporting, on our e-business center for reporting operator of record hours. And so we've already started including language in Part 2 of NPDES permits requiring use of this app. And then I included the link for where people can find instructions in case they needed it. So I'm going to pause just for a couple seconds, but this presentation is also available for people. The next administrative update I want to talk about is fees. So a couple years ago, there was legislation requiring that application fees and issuance fees be combined. And there was a lot of work that needed done on Ohio EPA's end to make this work with our existing software. We have finally hashed out all the bugs, and this is up and running now. So you might see a fee that is more than what you're used to seeing. There's not an extra fee, and Ohio EPA hasn't raised our fees. It's just that these 2 fees, the application fee and the issuance fee, have been combined. And I'm really excited about this particular update. So we are getting new permit drafting software. It's been in the works for a long time, about 7 years. The software that we're using now it was made in, I want to say, the early 90s. And it acts like it was created in the early 90s. It's got a lot of quirks. For example, it will randomly duplicate every parameter in a table, and it takes a permit writer a really long time to go in and clean it up when that happens. And so we're really excited because this new permit drafting software is going to make permit writing much more efficient. We're going to be able to track workload and workflow much better. And one feature that I am very excited about is it's going to have spell check. So I always joke that engineers can't spell, and so we're all very excited for this feature. So we're supposed to be transitioning to the new software in December. It was initially scheduled for November, but it got pushed back. And there is going to be about a 2-week blackout potentially, where we're not going to be able to use the software during that time. So if anybody listening has a permit renewal or a permit modification that they really need by a certain date within this time frame, I highly encourage you to be reaching out to your district office county person to talk to them about that. So now we're going to start diving into different rules and regulations and policies. And I wanted to start with state rule updates. I'm going to talk about the biocriteria narrative and variances, which I have been working on with our standards program. And then I will briefly talk about the aquatic life use rule package, and that is mostly from the standards program. So the biocriteria narrative, it's in Ohio Administrative Code 3745, Chapter 1, Rule 7. And the part I'm going to be talking about is C. And this is the part that pertains to NPDES permitting. So Ohio EPA has biological criteria. And what that is it measures the health of our fish and bugs in our streams, rivers, and lakes. And there is a provision, and this is what we're talking about, that allows flexibility to NPDES permit holders if all the biological criteria are in attainment. It allows Ohio EPA to use an alternate modeling approach, which could result in higher effluent limits for a particular pollutant. The status of this rulemaking is it's been out to IPR, and that is interested party review. And that's when Ohio EPA has made draft changes to the rule, and it's like public noticing the draft changes so people can see what the rule would actually look like. We received comments from several stakeholders. And so the NPDES Industrial Technical Lead, or one of them, Eric Nygaard, is working really hard. I'm giving a shout out to him, even though he's not on the line. He's been working really hard to respond to all comments. And the next step is we are going to be reaching out to anybody who commented and sitting down and talking with them about their comments. And the rule says that biological criteria take precedence, which we've talked a little bit about already. And so why are we making revisions to this rule? One reason is to end a federal objection. The federal EPA never approved the NPDES portion of this language. And in their minds, it doesn't exist. So in their minds, we shouldn't be using the flexibility provided for in the rule. A second reason is one of our directors signed a memorandum of agreement. So he talked with US EPA, they came to agreement on some issues, and the director put it in writing and signed it, and we haven't made revisions to honor that agreement. So as part of this rulemaking, we are doing that. And a third reason that I didn't include on here is the language can be ambiguous. And so I really wanted to take the language and make it more clear and concise. So we're moving the NPDES language out of Chapter 1, which is our Water Quality Standards chapter, and into Chapter 2, which is our Water Quality Standards Implementation chapter. And it includes a lot of detailed information about modeling. And since this language allows a flexibility, because it allows us to use an alternate modeling approach, we feel that that is the most appropriate place for this language to be. But we are keeping the language about biological criteria taking precedence in the Water Quality Standards chapter. And so some of the changes we're making, I did want to highlight a couple of them. And the first is, again, the NPDES language allows sometimes for higher limits. So before Ohio EPA uses this flexibility, there are some considerations that we do currently look into, but it wasn't formally documented. And one of those is the impact to mussels and amphibians, or categories that aren't captured in our current biological criteria. And so, for example, if a discharger wants to discharge higher concentrations of TDS, or more precisely, they already are, our biological criteria look at the fish and the bugs, but we know that mussels are more sensitive to total dissolved solids, TDS. So we need to take that into account, because although the fish and the bugs might be doing great, the mussels might not be. Another consideration would be looking at downstream segments. So for example, the segment immediately following a discharge might be attaining, but then the stream turns into exceptional warm water habitat, and that segment is being negatively impacted by the discharge. That's another thing that needs considered. And then lastly, narrative toxicity needs looked into. And then this last change is surveys, and this isn't really a change, it's something we're already doing, but again, we would be formalizing it in the rule. And that is, these flexibilities are allowed when all the biological criteria are attaining, but streams can change over time. So if that hasn't been looked at in 15 years, a survey needs done to verify that all of the biological criteria are still being met. The second rule package that's being worked on is water quality standard variance. And I put on here that there's new-ish federal rules. The federal rules came out in 2016, so they're not exactly that new anymore. And Ohio EPA needs to revise our variances rules so that we are consistent with the federal language. Federal EPA has been encouraging the use of variances. And initially, when Ohio EPA reviewed the federal language, we thought that we interpreted it to say that an individual variance had to be approved through a rulemaking. But we've since learned that we can develop a process where the individual variance is approved as part of a permit action. So we are pursuing that as a way to approve an individual variance. Then on the left-hand side of the screen, I've included what an individual variance entails. So stream standards to be met. There's an interim attainable condition when the variance is issued that needs identified. And what that is let's say a facility is seeking an individual variance for TDS. What is the lowest concentration that they can have in their effluent right now? And that's the interim attainable condition. And then the highest attainable condition is when the variance ends. So let's say a variance is sought for 10 years. How low can the facility get that TDS concentration after the 10 years is up? And during that 10 years, the facility should be making progress either through a PMP, or the variance can also be giving time for a facility to build up funds for treatment if that's necessary, or both. There might be some BMPs or PMPs and BMPs that a facility can do in the meantime while they are building funds for treatment. This slide is about multiple discharger variances, and that is plural, even though right now we only have one multiple discharger variance. So the one we currently have is our mercury general variance, and Ohio is planning on renewing that. One change that we are considering that we think needs to happen is right now the rule says that a facility must either meet 12 nanograms per liter as an annual average to be eligible for the general mercury variance, or project that they can meet that annual average at the end of 5 years. And we believe that language needs tightened to just say that the facility has to be meeting the 12 nanograms per liter as an annual average to be eligible. We're also looking into the difference between the two basins. So in the Ohio River Basin, facilities need to meet a 12 nanogram per liter on a monthly average, and the Lake Erie Basin facilities need to meet a 1.3 nanogram per liter limit. And so that 1.3 is a lot more challenging to meet than the 12, and most of our facilities in the Ohio River Basin are achieving that 12 now. So we're looking into if it's still needed in both basins, or is it really just needed in the Lake Erie Basin because that 1.3 is such a low number. And then ammonia. So we don't currently have a general variance for ammonia, but it is something that we have been looking into. In 2013, EPA adopted new criteria for ammonia, and the new criteria is lower. So Ohio is proposing to adopt new criteria, the new federal criteria, along with the variance for small continuous discharge lagoons. So one of our experts, our technical experts, John Van Dommelen, looked into whether our plants could meet the new lower criteria. And he determined that mostly they can if they're being operated and maintained properly, but not the small continuous discharge lagoons. So we are currently looking into the economic and social impacts, and stay tuned for more information on that. I'm just going to briefly talk about the triennial review because this is clearly just a water quality standards rule package, whereas the other two were combined with NPDES. But the federal EPA has published revised criteria for several different pollutants, including copper, selenium, cadmium, and ammonia. And I'm going to focus on ammonia because it ties into the general variants that the NPDES program is working on. EPA published revised criteria for aquatic life on August 22nd, 2013. And the reason that there's revised criteria that's lower is because there's been new toxicity data that reflects freshwater mussel and snail sensitivity. So the old criteria mostly looked at fish and bugs, but now there's data showing that ammonia is more toxic to mussels and snails than to fish and bugs. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about policy. And this slide is about federal EPA focus areas. And the first one is environmental justice, and this isn't specific to NPDES. It's a broad focus area. And what environmental justice is it means applying environmental regulations consistently, regardless of the average income of an area. And I believe we do a really great job of this in the NPDES program. The second thing I want to talk about is more NPDES specific, and that's EPA's real-time reviews. So every year, EPA chooses between 5 to 10 NPDES permits, and they do what they call a real-time review on it. So when we public notice the permit, they have an opportunity to review it and provide us comments. And these are what they're focusing on when they choose the permits they're going to review. So the first one is TMDLs. So if there's an approved TMDL on the receiving stream that the NPDES discharges to, and they're very focused on phosphorus. So this would mostly apply to phosphorus TMDLs, which leads to the second thing they're focusing on, which is phosphorus limits and Lake Erie permits. Ohio EPA has a rule that requires all POTWs designated as majors or that have an average design flow of 1 million gallons per day or more to have a monthly average phosphorus limit of 1 milligrams per liter. And EPA feels that that should be lower. And so we've been having a lot of discussions with them about that. And that is one criteria that they are looking at when they're choosing what permits to include on their real-time review list. Next is Ohio EPA focus areas. There has been renewed focus on issuing permits before they expire. And I really think that the new software that I talked about earlier is going to help us do a really great job at this. The software is going to allow us to be more efficient and manage our workflow. And so I think that's really going to help us meet this goal of renewing all our permits before expiration. And then a second focus area is consistent and quality permits. So I want to make sure that all of our NPDES permits are consistently written and consistent with all state and federal rules and regulations. And then the last focus area is customer service. And so that just means providing excellent customer service for both our internal and external clients. So, if we get a question, answering that question promptly and politely. And that leads us to nutrients. So I have some lovely pictures of harmful algal blooms here. And harmful algal blooms, which we also call HABs, have been a really important focus area for Ohio EPA, US EPA, as well as a lot of other different groups. A lot of you have probably heard about harmful algal blooms or HABs in Lake Erie from news stories. But they're also happening on smaller streams and lakes, as well as in the Ohio River. And so what causes these HABs is cyanobacteria. And the cyanobacteria, it likes warm water and it likes nutrients. It likes phosphorus. And so these harmful algal blooms are caused by an overgrowth of the cyanobacteria. And so one thing Ohio EPA is working on to help combat the HABs is our Maumee River TMDL. And this picture shows a map, and in blue is the Maumee River watershed. So it's in Northwest Ohio. And the TMDL is its own program, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but the watershed drains a total of 5,024 miles, and the Maumee River goes directly into the western basin of Lake Erie. The land use in the watershed is predominantly cultivated crops, along with some urban development, hay and pasture lands, and forest. And the TMDL program has been working really hard on outreach, and we are getting ready to start point source outreach, which I'll be participating in. But right now they have 3 video presentations online, as well as the draft loading analysis plan. And they are accepting comments on the draft loading analysis plan until October 22nd, 2021. And so for more information, I have included the link here. The videos are really excellent. So if you're interested, I recommend starting with watching the videos. And it looks like it is time for another poll. Okay, so how many times has the Cuyahoga River caught on fire? And here's a picture of the Cuyahoga River on fire. It's an old picture, so it's black and white. So is it A, 1, B, 13, C, 25, or D, 40? All right, so it looks like 30% of people say 1, 47% say 13, 14% say 25, and 9% say 40. So the majority does win. The correct answer is 13. And if you look it up, it says at least 13 that have been documented. So you can go ahead and go back to my slides now if you'd like, Helen.
There you go.
Thank you. And I really like this question because if I go back to the picture, you know, a long time ago, the Cuyahoga River, it was pretty gross. It caught on fire several times. If you stuck a white rag or something in the river and lifted it back out, it would be brown or black. And now the Cuyahoga has come such a long way. So I really like talking about this because it's a really nice success story. And so this slide shows a nice picture of the Cuyahoga River, which is doing really well. And it's in a large part due to a lot of work from agency people, as well as from industrial facilities and wastewater treatment plants who've done a really good job treating their discharges, as well as things like dam removal. Okay, so statewide 208 plan update. This is something that I've been working on. And for anyone who doesn't know what the 208 plan is, the 208 plan is a plan for who can sewer what areas. And the purpose of this is similar to how you don't necessarily need 5 hospitals within a 2-mile square foot radius. We don't want sewers going up and down the same road with some houses going to one wastewater treatment plant and other houses going to another. That's not an effective use of resources. So we have a 208 plan. And the last update was done in 2006, so 15 years ago. And there's a lot of outdated information in the 2006 208 plan. One thing is technology has changed a lot since 2006. So a lot of the maps that are a part of the current plan are PDFs of maps. And my vision is to have an interactive GIS map that anybody can go and click on anywhere in Ohio, and the service area and different prescriptions that apply to that spot will pop up. Another thing is the 208 plan in the text talks about the different Division of Surface Water programs. So for example, it talks about our TMDL program in detail. And our TMDL program has changed a lot since 2006. A few years ago, there was an NPDES permit appeal, and Ohio EPA lost the permit appeal, and all of our TMDLs were invalidated. Since then, there has been legislation passed that didn't necessarily change, but formalized an outreach process that Ohio EPA now follows. And lots of other changes as well have happened to the TMDL program. So the plan really needs updated so that it has current information in it. And we are going to update the statewide plan, taking a phased approach. And I am going to walk through that phased approach in more detail in a couple slides. And we are working closely with our local communities. Local communities typically have a lot of interest in the statewide plan, and it affects the local communities, so we anticipate working closely with them. So I mentioned that the last time the 208 plan was updated was in 2006, and I started a little over 9 years ago. So I definitely wasn't the 208 manager the last time it was updated, and in fact, I think it was a year before I interned with EPA. So I have not been through this process before. It's new to me. So I created this process that we are intending to follow as we update the statewide plan. So step one is going to be outreach to interested stakeholders and local governments. And this means phone calls followed by a letter. Also, we do have a fact sheet about the statewide plan update available online. And I should mention, I said I created this. I should say me and my team created this. Step two would be public noticing technical information that will be used to update the plan. And so for Central Ohio, we have contracted with MORPC, and they are doing some of the planning work for us. My team has fantastic engineers and scientists, but no planners. So things like population growth projections aren't exactly in our wheelhouse. But MORPC is great at putting together that kind of information, so they are helping us out, and we will public notice the technical information that they've put together. Step three will be to meet with stakeholders who provided comments, and also local governments, whether or not they commented, to discuss updates. Step four will be to draft revisions to the existing plan, taking into account what we learned during the stakeholder meetings. And then step five is going to be to public notice the draft revised plan along with public noticing a public hearing. Step six, we're going to consider and respond to all comments. I feel like it's pretty likely we'll make some updates to the plan based on what we hear in the comments. So then we're going to go ahead and public notice the proposed final plan in step seven, so people can see the updates we made after receiving comments during the first public notice period. The final step is sending the plan to the governor to certify. So the 208 plan and major changes do need certified by the governor of Ohio. And this is a very colorful map that shows the different phases. So in pink, that is the first phase. It is Delaware and Licking counties, along with quite a few southeast counties. So the changes that we're planning to make in the southeast counties aren't major. It's really just applying general prescriptions. And then also in phase one, we would be updating some of that really out-of-date information I talked about, like with the TMDL program. Phase two is in kind of the darker green color and encompasses Union, Franklin, and Madison counties. Phase three is in light blue, and that would be Logan and Morrow counties. And then phase four is in orange, and that would be Fairfield and Pickaway. Then you'll see, not a lot, but quite a bit of the dark purple color. We've only mapped out the first four phases. And we tried to target areas where there's been a lot of changes recently. And then the other colors are our area-wides. And we contract with area-wides who manage the 208 programs in their areas. And so, for example, if you look in Northwest Ohio, you'll see the yellow color, and that is TMCOG is the area-wide there. And they all the area-wides do a great job of managing the 208 plans in their counties. And the area-wides have also been working with me on that interactive map. So they've actually already put their counties into the statewide map. We just need to get the counties, I'll go back just a second, all of the other counties that aren't in an area-wide Ohio EPA is responsible for, so we just need to get all of that into the map. So now I'm going to talk about some frequently asked questions that I get when I do presentations or when I'm talking to facilities. And so one of the more common questions I get are my nutrient limits going to get lower? And I understand why people ask me this. They're trying to plan and they want to know what's coming. But unfortunately, it's also a really hard answer because it really is very site specific. So right now in the Lake Erie Basin, we have the rule that says all major POTWs or publicly owned treatment works or POTWs that have a design flow of 1 MGD or greater have the monthly average limit of 1 milligrams per liter. And right now, Ohio EPA is not working on any changes to that. So we are not working to make that number lower. And we're also not working to broaden who that applies to. Right now, the agency is focused on non-point sources and that Maumee River TMDL. That being said, if there's a point source that's discharging to receiving stream and the receiving stream is in non-attainment, that non-attainment is due to phosphorus. That phosphorus is the point source is discharging phosphorus and reductions would move the needle on attainment. The limits are likely to get lower, but I can't say for sure without doing a detailed analysis because again, we really evaluate this on a case-by-case basis, looking specifically at the facility as well as the receiving stream. The second question I get, especially when a facility is applying for a new NPDES permit or a modification as part of the renewal process, is how long does a permit renewal take or how long does it take to get a new NPDES permit? And my canned answer is 180 days. And of course, that can be done faster, and sometimes it takes longer just depending on the circumstance. If a facility is requesting an increase in loading and the permit has to go through anti-degradation, that adds some time on. Or if a permit is on EPA's real-time review list, that also adds some time on. And so again, my canned answer is 180 days. We can work through most NPDES permits in that amount of time, but some go faster and some go slower. And then the last question is, how can I make the process go smoother or faster, right? I get asked that, especially if people are wanting to expand. And the first thing I always say is reach out early and often. If you know that you need to expand or you know that you're struggling with a specific pollutant, reaching out to us early and working with us is really beneficial to everybody. And then I have one other tip, and it's it's one of the last things we're going to do. Oh, wait, I got ahead of myself. So the other common thing that holds up permit renewals or even new NPDES permits is that we get an incomplete application in. So something that you can do to make the renewal process or the modification process faster is to make sure that the application is complete. And I've included some bullet points here for some of the more common errors we see on NPDES application. So the first one is, are you submitting the correct forms? If you're an industrial facility, did you submit Form 2C? So things like that, make sure you're submitting all the correct forms. Do you have biosolids? Do you need Form 2S? Or sludge, I should say, not biosolids, sorry. And then this is more for industrial facilities, and that is Form 2C completed correctly? Does it include all the data that's required? And then another big issue we see with Form 2C data is that the correct data is there, but it was sampled with insufficiently sensitive methods. And for example, if the water quality standard is 2, and the method detection limit is 200, that doesn't really tell us if that pollutant's in the effluent at a concentration that might contribute to an exceedance of water quality standards. So one thing that we see is that data was sampled in not using sufficiently sensitive methods. The third bullet point here, and again, this is for industrial facilities, is to make sure the correct SIC codes and federal effluent guidelines are identified. Double check and make sure all calculations and diagrams were included. Make sure the anti-degradation addendum was filled out correctly and included. And then we often will do a pre-permit inspection for our NPDES facilities before we start drafting the NPDES permit. Okay, and here we are for my tip that I started going into earlier. And this is where we are all going to do some math together. And I am going to end with this, and I'll let you know that this is not going to be a polling question. I thought about it, but I thought that might cause some anxiety. So a lot of facilities submit data to us, and there might just be 1 or 2 data points for a particular pollutant. And when we receive data, when there's less than 10 samples, it automatically goes into our PEQ method A, which includes a multiplier. So N here equals the number of samples, and F is the multiplier. So you can see if we only have 1 sample, we multiply that by 6.2. So even though the sample might be pretty far below the allocation, we're multiplying it by 6.2 because there's no confidence that that data, not no confidence, there's less confidence that that data point is representative of what's being discharged because there's only 1 data point. So we're going to go through an example, and the example is for barium. So let's say we have 2 data points, 158 micrograms per liter and 130 micrograms per liter. So going back to our table, there's 2 samples. So we take the highest sample and multiply it by 3.8. So the highest sample was 158, and we multiplied it by 3.8 to give us 600. And so that equals the PEQ maximum. And for the PEQ average, we take that number and multiply it by 0.73. And so if you look at the waste load allocations, which is the number that needs met by the discharger in order to be protective of the receiving stream, the maximum value is 4,000 and the average is 420. So if you look at the PEQ average, it's 438, which is higher than the 420, and limits and monitoring are going to be required. But if you look at the actual data, it's pretty far below the 420. So one tip I have is just to screen the data, and if there's a situation like this, to collect some additional samples. Because if we had, 1 or 2 more samples, it would get kicked out of reasonable potential, and monitoring or limits may not be required. And so in this second part, I used 12 samples, and 158 is still the maximum. If we go back to the table with 12 samples, not clicking quickly, there we are. With 12 samples, the multiplier is only 1.6. And so that 158 multiplied by 1.6 is 253, which makes the PEQ average 185. And that 185 is 44% of 420, and no limits or monitoring would likely be included in the permit. All right, and it is time for another poll. So the last poll question is, what recently got combined? Is it A, issuance and application fees, B, the NPDES and water quality standards programs, C, issuance and annual discharge fees, or D, coal and quarry general permits? All right, so again, the majority wins. 66% of people said issuance and application fees, and that is the correct answer. So those 2 fees have been combined. So again, just kind of heads up that you might see a fee that's more than what you're used to seeing, and our fees haven't gone up. And there's no extra fees. It's just the combination of two fees that have been around for a long time. I do see some other answers in there. So I do just want to let everybody know that if you're looking to get CEU credits, you don't have to answer the questions correctly. You just have to answer them. So no worries there. All right. And you can go, there we are. All right, so that was the end of my presentation. I do have my municipal technical lead on with us, David Brumbaugh, and we are happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay, Ashley, I am looking at the questions that David has put in here to answer. And the first one is, can you repeat what the date range was for the blackout that will be happening due to updates?
Yeah, I can. So it's going to happen in December. I don't know that we have a hard date yet. They were initially telling me November, and it got pushed back to December. And they're anticipating that it could potentially be out for 2 weeks. So that means that NPDES permit writers won't be able to get into the software during that time. So if you need a renewal or a modification or a new permit finalized in December or January or even February, I would really be talking to your district county person now so we can work with you and make sure we're getting you what you need.
Okay, the next one is there a tentative schedule for 208 updates?
That is a great question. And we are hoping, so we started this process before COVID-19 hit, and we really wanted to be able to meet with people in person to talk about a lot of the 208 issues, you know, so we could all be together looking at maps and things like that. But I believe we're really going to start working on it in earnest in the new year. So I would say we're going to start in January on phase 1. And again, I've never been through the process, so I don't really know how long it's going to take, but I'm estimating that it will probably take a year to get done. So if we start in January, I'm hoping that we could finish before the end of the year. Oh, and we're starting with phase 1 first. Some of the other phases we think we could do concurrently, but because we've never been through the process before, we want to get through one phase before we start the others.
Okay, next question. Could you clarify at which stage each of the rules packages mentioned at the beginning of the webinar are currently in? ESO, IPR, proposed rule?
Yep, so I can. So all of the water quality standards rules had gone to ESO, but we might redo ESO for the aquatic life use and the variances package. And then the biocriteria narrative rulemaking has been through IPR, and we are working to respond to all comments. So we've been working on that and having a lot of meetings. And then our next step is we're going to actually reach out to the people who provided comments and sit down and talk to them about their questions or concerns.
Okay, our next question is, what is Ohio EPA's Division of Surface Water doing in regards to PFAS?
So I know that there's a work group, but I am not a part of that work group. So I don't have a great answer, but I can talk to them and get back to that person with an answer.
Okay. Another question is, does the 208 plan impact industrial facilities or just publicly owned treatment works?
Right. So the 208 plan largely impacts publicly owned treatment works because a lot of it is who sewers what areas. So that could be, you know, a municipal corporation or a county. it can impact developers and things like that, and it can impact industries, but it mostly impacts public facilities.
Okay, when is the next multi-sector general permit expected to be renewed, and do I need to apply for new coverage?
Right. So when is the next multi-sector general permit? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Are they talking about the stormwater general permit?
The question is, when is the multi-sector general permit expected to be renewed, and do I need to apply for new coverage? They don't indicate.
Okay. So I know that I'm guessing it's a stormwater program, and you will need to apply for new coverage. I would need to talk to them about when that's going to be done. I know they were working on it, but I don't know when they expect to have it finalized.
Okay, we can always follow up with them afterwards. You will get a copy of all the questions. Next one is, how many individual variances have been approved in Ohio?
So in the past, we have had a couple that have been approved, but those are under the old federal rules. So right now, we don't have any facilities that have gotten an individual variance under the new federal rules. There are 2 that I've been working on with facilities. I was working on one with a 3rd facility, but they were actually able to find an alternative to meet the water quality standard. So they stopped pursuing the individual variance.
Okay, next question is, which pollutants do you typically see individual variances requested for?
Right. So the 2 pollutants that we have most commonly seen an individual variance requesting is for ammonia and also for total dissolved solids. So total dissolved solids can be challenging for facilities because the treatment is expensive. So really the only treatment is RO. Or it can be diluted out through flow augmentation or finding a larger receiving water. So those are the 2 parameters I most commonly see requests for.
Okay, we're getting lots of great questions in. I'd just like to remind you, you can continue chatting those into the questions pane. If we don't get to your question here this morning, which I don't believe we will because we have so many coming in, someone will get back with you after the webinar. And we have a question here, when will the presentation be available? And I will go ahead and answer that one. We are recording the webinar and we will post it on the agency YouTube channel. It usually takes us about a week to get up there. And we will also have a link there to the PowerPoint presentation as well. But again, before the webinar ends, I'd like to remind you, you can go to your documents on your interface and you can pull down those documents during the webinar. So we do have a copy of the PowerPoint up there. Okay, next question is, what can facilities do if they're exceeding TDS allocations?
Right, so there's a few options if TDS is being exceeded. And this is one where I definitely recommend coming and talking to us early and often. So I mentioned a few of these earlier, but the options are either flow augmentation. So, we see dilution isn't the solution to pollution, but it kind of is for TDS. And so finding a larger receiving stream that's close by or pulling in water to dilute the effluent is one option, and then RO is another. I haven't seen a facility put in RO. It can be costly. And then again, if there's no option that works, we can start talking about an individual variance or using the biocriteria narrative, or also a site-specific standard. So when we develop water quality standards, we look at the impact on aquatic life on certain species. And there might be something about the particular receiving stream that makes TDS less toxic. So the toxicity of total dissolved solids is really dependent on the specific constituents that make up the TDS. Is there a lot of sulfate or is there a lot of chloride? What's the exact cocktail in the TDS? And then when the receiving stream has more hardness in it, the TDS is less toxic. So a site-specific standard can take some of that information into account, that there might be a particular reason why it's less toxic at that site.
Okay, we're going to have one more question, and then I will go into our final closing remarks. Do you anticipate that standards affecting water treatment plants will change, specifically standards related to discharge of filter backwash and solids handling operations?
Can you repeat that question one more time, please?
Sure. Do you anticipate that standards affecting water treatment plants will change, specifically standards related to discharge of filter backwash and solids handling operations?
I don't know. I haven't been a part of any conversations involving that, but that's something that I could reach out to some of my counterparts and get a more definitive answer.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your great presentation, Ashley, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. You have lots of good questions, and again, if your question didn't get answered, someone will follow up with you via email after the webinar. I'd like to invite you to join us for some upcoming webinars. On November 3rd, we have our Recycling Ohio Grant Kickoff. This webinar will discuss Ohio EPA's 2022 Recycling and Litter Prevention Grant application process, funding opportunities, and eligible project activities targeted by this grant program. On November 9th, we have Feet on the Street, Fighting Contamination Across Ohio. Join the Recycling Partnership for an overview of how 6 Ohio communities reduce their contamination rates. On November 18th, we have Fight the Bite. It's Ohio EPA's Mosquito Control Grant application overview. This webinar will provide a brief overview of the Mosquito Control Grant Program and information on how to apply for the upcoming grant cycle. And if you missed past webinars or would like to register for these and upcoming webinars, check out our training tab at epa.ohio.gov/DEFA. You can also go to our training tab and subscribe to receive electronic notices for upcoming training. With that, we'll end today's webinar. Again, thank you for joining us and have a great day.